what I have found in my own insomnia journey, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you was when I was looking at, there was a precipitating factor. It was COVID and shift work and accumulated stress over years and years of years and practicing at a very high level and being very busy. That's the clear picture. But then there comes well, how the heck do I get out of this piece of it? And one of the themes that really helped anchor me because of my Christian faith was the fact that I held on to this thread of, I know I'm suffering right now. Insomnia really is suffering to me. This stinks. Yeah. But what I think a lot of my patients sometimes have difficulty realizing, and I try to get them there, is it's not the insomnia is the symptom, and you're feeling that suffering, and your brain goes crazy, and it's so hard to like separate these almost abnormal feelings that come about from the change in brain chemistry from insomnia. It's a vicious swirl, and it's complicated and complex, as you mentioned. But to get out of that spiral, one of the anchors was there is a reason behind this. And if I could just kind of figure out what that reason is, I'm going to slowly begin to get that. It's going to take a long time for me. It took a year, but that spiral is going to slowly stop. And I'm going to still be that typical chronic insomnia patients where most of the time it's okay. Other times I'm not sleeping so great. But if the majority of the time I'm okay, that's my challenge, and that's fine. And that's, it's not about perfection. It's about progress, right? That's what we tell our patients. But for me, the anchor really was realizing that my Christian faith told me that God had a purpose for me. And I just knew that I was evolving out of what I assumed my purpose would be when I was 20 years younger, going through medical school, going through that. I'm going to be a big, bad pulmonary critical care sleep doctor. And that's what I'm going to do forever. And then suddenly I didn't want to do that anymore. And I'm like, but why? But why? But why? When you lay out your rules, yes, you're doing it in the frame, but you talk about something called sleepless night rules. And this is really like your adaptation of stimulus control. If you can talk about stimulus control in the standard context so that we can define that for our listeners, and then go into how you frame it with your sleepless night rules. This is how you're starting to integrate those Christian elements. Let's get into that a little bit, because that really resonated with me. And I didn't have a framework, as I was telling you before we got on, to really define that. And I'm reading your journal. I'm like, I think he kind of got into my brain a little bit, but I hadn't organized it that way,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So stimulus control therapy, for anyone who's listening that's not aware. So really that comes out of a behaviorism, operant conditioning kind of framework of psychology. And so it's treating actually falling asleep as conceptualizing as an instrumental act or an operant. And so then we're, following of trying to look at, are there stimuli that you have that are not compatible with being able to fall asleep, and so trying to remove those stimulus. So then out of that came the stimulus control instructions. So typically how I talk to my patients about that is usually just like, you are trying to wait until you're actually feeling sleepy to fall asleep or get into bed. And then if you can't fall asleep, it varies depending upon who you're talking to for stimulus control. I think like the original Bootson article, I think says like something like 10 minutes or something like that. Sometimes I don't even put a time on it, because I'm just like, whenever you feel like you're not falling asleep, get out of bed. And so, traditionally stimulus control, we'll say 10 minutes, 15 minutes or something like that. Get out of bed and then wait to feel sleepy again. And then you're going to lay back down and then repeat that until you actually fall asleep. And then there's the caveats of, you're only using your bed for sleep and for sex. And you are, trying to have a consistent bedtime and wake time, and also have no naps during the day. And so all of those things kind of give the guideline of essentially utilizing your sleep pressure that is going to build over the course of several days. Because I, tell all my patients, you're going to have a terrible night. This isn't magic. Like, your first night is not going to be great.
This is the hard stuff.
This is the hard part.
This is the hard way to go, but it's the most effective.
Exactly. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but hang on. So usually the first couple nights we have some terrible nights, but we're building our sleep pressure. We're not taking long naps. That is going to take that away. And we're having a consistent wake time till eventually you're going to have some consolidation of your sleep. And isn't a magic therapy that all of a sudden gives you 10 hours of sleep. We're going to get you what your body is able to produce and consolidate. But we know you're going to be more efficient with your sleep. You're going to be able to fall asleep quicker. And then also we know of subjective measurements of sleep that you're going to have improved satisfaction from your sleep because you're having those longer periods. And so that's really the stimulus control instructions. And really that is what the sleepless night rules are. I had a lot of mixed feelings about writing this book because I am such a physician first. I was like, okay, well, I have to test my sleepless night rules first before I can even publish a book because it's different from the stimulus control instructions. And if I'm making some kind of change, then I don't want to promise, people that it's actually going to, make their sleep better if it's not the exact same thing. I was getting too analytical in it in some ways, but at the flip side, I'm like, okay, I'm building this off of an understanding of the same recommendations in the stimulus control instructions. So how I frame the sleepless night rules is cease before bed and wait until you're feeling sleepy. And then if you can't fall asleep, that same thing, rise out of bed. And then the third one that is arguably the most important kind of tweak or difference is to connect with God and wait to feel sleepy. And then repeat for step 4, repeat rules 2 and 3 until you fall asleep, and then resist sleeping in and taking naps. So you can tell just from the surface that pretty much is the stimulus control instructions, which I think is what hit me in my sleep medicine fellowship. And as I was learning about cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and just me as a practicing Christian and reading my Bible and going through the Psalms, I'm like, I'm seeing some kind of parallel here of these ancient writers who are struggling with their own really terrible circumstances. The original context of the Psalms goes through a part of Israel's history where their whole way of life is destroyed. They have a neighboring culture that comes in and wrecks everything and kills so many people, and they're pushed out into exile. And that's these people who are struggling with God, if we are your chosen people, why is this kind of happening? So really, really, really heavy stuff. And then what you see as you read them is that they're doing some really similar things. There's a verse towards the beginning of the Psalms that talks about meditating in your heart upon your bed. And then another verse that talks about rising from your bed when they can't sleep and connecting with God. And so it was I was seeing all of these moments of clarity and parallelism. And I was like, there's got to be something here because I'm seeing both things in both realms.
I wanted to say that normally, depending on what your faith is or how you approach it, for some people, they just need to be busy or doing something. Sitting still is going to be the antithesis of what's going to get them back to sleep. Yeah. So understand, for those who are listening, there are multiple ways to approach getting back to sleep. And Ben is not covering all of them, and nor am I expecting him to. But I can say in my personal experience, for me, kind of distracting my mind wasn't settling to me when I couldn't sleep. So really, and occasionally, believe me, occasionally I would just be like, forget it. I've had enough. Enough is enough. And I'd put on, it would often be a show that gave me great comfort. For some reason, Magnum PI in his red car was one of them. I think it was taking me back to when I was a kid. Yeah. And multiple episodes of Park and Rec. So I've said that to my patients often, that because I know how it goes. I know there's nothing scary in it. And for some reason, for me, there would be times when that distraction would work. If I was in a different frame of mind, however, you don't just need to do the same thing all the time. Sometimes it's good to reflect. And so when I was going through part of where I struggled with sleep would be I'd have this, all of a sudden I'd be going, and then I had this active brain about what I wanted to do and where God was taking me. For me, then it became journaling as my form of prayer, putting my thoughts onto paper. That sometimes works for some folks. And so I think your perspective, though, really at the end of the day is exactly what I found probably propelled me forward more, was less of the distracting stuff. When I was really not ready to deal with stuff, the distraction was what was necessary. Right. But once I got into the frame of mind where I was open to having a better relationship with God and thinking about those difficult things and really processing it, sometimes, especially for us parents that may be very busy during the day on top of our jobs,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's the only time you get any peace or any time you get to really pray or meditate. So it's, in a way, using your time wisely.
Yeah.
Food for thought.